I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You're the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Great to have you here today on the program. And I was just looking at the website of today's guests, and he's got a stat up there that I thought, that's exactly where I was going to lead with this introduction, which is the fact that so many people these days, close people, friends, family members, people maybe in the same congregation, because of the politics in our country, and it's an election year, so here we go again, right? They don't talk to each other anymore. I literally know children and parents who do not talk to each other because they voted differently. And this, I don't understand it, because I have been able to talk to someone that I completely disagree with and be civil, find some common ground, maybe do some things to overcome this gap that we have. And so I guess I expect most people to be that way, but we're not. Why are we that way? What is this cancel culture that is not just, kind of out there, but very personal? And how do we overcome that? Because I believe as Christians, that's part of what we're here to do. And we're going to talk about that. There's a new book out called In the Stalemate, and is written by Sean McDowell and Tim Muehlhoff. And they're talking about how to start talking to people that completely disagree with us, or sometimes don't even completely disagree with us, because I do believe we can find common ground with just about anybody. But Tim Muehlhoff is my guest today, and hopefully this conversation today will help you in your daily life. And if you're struggling with this personally, I really think it's going to be important. If you know somebody who's struggling with this, hit that share button and say, hey, listen to this conversation. I think it may provide a bit of a roadmap to improving the relationships that you care about. So appreciate you here today. Chat is open. Hello out there. If you want to be a part of the conversation, jump in. Just be nice. That's all I ask. You can disagree. Just be nice. Tim, great to have you on the program. Welcome to Life Today Live.
Randy, thank you. I really look forward to our conversation.
Now, I will say this. I forgot to do this because of other things going on this morning, but okay, it says releases June 2024. I have an advanced copy. Is it available right now?
Out.
It is.
It's out 2 days ago.
Okay, well, perfect.
Yeah.
That's probably why we scheduled it for today. So the book is available if you guys want to follow up. But walk us through a little bit of sort of the why that you got into this, and you and Sean wanted to address this issue.
Well, there's a huge cultural moment happening today, and we really need to pay attention to it as the church. So listen to this survey from Pew Research. 98% of Americans, let me say that again, 98% of us would say incivility is a threat to the country. 67% would say we've already reached crisis levels of incivility. So I think most Americans would say we cannot continue this way. We've got to find a way of doing it differently. With that being said, the only question for the church is, will we offer an alternative? When they look at us, do they see people who are convicted? We have truth, but we do it with love and gentleness. And let me just say, Randy, being the co-director of Biola's Winsome Conviction Project, we're not seeing a whole lot of love. We're seeing a lot of truth and a lot of churches splitting, Christian organizations splitting over mask mandates, CRT, Black Lives Matter, even one church, a smoke machine used in worship services because a bunch of people saw that as liberalism coming into the church. So, but I think there's a cultural moment here that we really can rise up and say, we can speak truth and love. We can do both.
Yeah. As someone who stood next to those in many worship services, it's not actually smoke. It's some kind of weird dry thing, and it's hard to breathe around. But how do you define incivility? Because, I mean, what does that just mean? Disagreement, or what does that mean when you cite that stat? Do you know?
So I'm a communication professor, So this is borrowing from Georgetown linguist Deborah Tannen's language, the argument culture. She wrote 20 years ago. My goodness, imagine the book she'd write today. Okay, so we have two levels of communication. We have the content level. That would be our convictions, our beliefs, our ideology. The relational level is the amount of respect between two individuals, the amount of kindness, and the amount of empathy. When we say we're in the argument culture or incivility, it's not that our content bounces off each other, but that the relational level is what's really been hurt, and that we don't have respect for each other.
Yeah.
We don't empathize with each other, and shockingly, there's not a whole lot of compassion between different camps when it comes to certain social issues. That's what we would say is incivility, is we're trampling on the relational level of our communication.
Okay, so let me ask this question, because there are things that I believe are completely wrong, unbiblical, and I think let's look at some of the things that are foundational and not just necessarily interpretive or doctrinal in the sense of secondary, tertiary issues, but core issues. And I'll leave it fairly open, and we can get specifics if you want to, but I fundamentally disrespect a position that I think is antithetical to not just the gospel, but even to like nature itself, right? I don't respect that position. How can I respect the person who holds that position while not seeming to align with the position? Because I think that's where a lot of people's fear comes from. They're like,
Right.
if I don't take a hard line, people are going to think I'm over there too, right? So how do we walk that?
Well, I think we take the cue from what Christ did. He was able to walk this amazing balance. So in the Gospels, we get him having table fellowship with notorious sinners,
Yes.
is how one of the gospel writers identifies them. So for sure, we would say Jesus is not compromising when he's at the table having fellowship. And Darrell Bach, a New Testament scholar, says this table of fellowship was more radical than what we think it was. It wasn't Jesus just happened to be sitting in proximity with people having a meal. He was fellowshipping with them under the Jewish understanding of what sharing a meal would be like. So he was able to communicate love, but at the same time hold the line. And I think that's what we need to do today, is hold this line of the content and the relational. Peter gives it a beautiful illustration of this. He says, I want you to give a reason for the hope that is in you. Be ready. That's content. But do it with gentleness and reverence. And then he says, and even when you're insulted, I want you to give a blessing instead. So I think those are the marching orders we get from the Apostle Peter and Jesus's example. Now, did he have bitter disagreements with Pharisees? Did he overturn tables? Absolutely. We need to put that in context. But I think Jesus showed there was a real willingness to cross the aisle and talk to people who would get him in a lot of trouble eventually. That would be women particularly, and tax gatherers.
Samaritans.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Samaritans. So I think we kind of have the marching orders and the example from Peter and from Jesus. We're afraid to do it as Christians because we're going to get hit really hard from within the Christian community.
Yeah, well, or like Jesus did, and the apostles did, from the Pharisees. And, right. And I do, man. I see this Pharisee spirit in the church today is very strong, and it is mean. And what's interesting though is you touched on it, and that Jesus was very gentle with the lost, with and even with the Pharisees who would come to him genuinely, right? We saw this with Nicodemus. But for those who there is just steeped in this religious culture, the whitewashed tombs, they look good on the outside, but they're rotten to the core. He was actually harsh with those religious people, and really nice to people who were complete heathens. I mean, shouldn't we take a cue from that? Because I think so many people we're more afraid of the friendly fire from within the church than we are sometimes from the outside, which prevents us from hanging around sinners while not being a sinner ourselves.
Right. So, in the book, a disagreement arose. Sean and I have known each other for over 25 years. I so admire his apologetic ministry. His YouTube channel has over 280,000 followers.
That's great.
He's so lucky to have me to write the. No, I'm kidding. So we write the book, but we disagree on pronoun usage. Okay. There would be situations I would use pronouns, and there'd be situations I wouldn't. Sean articulately says I wouldn't use preferred pronouns. So we kind of realized we have this disagreement. Let's not ignore it. Let's take the very principles we wrote about and end the stalemate. Let's have the disagreement in 2 chapters at the end of the book. So we really do. But here's what's happening, Randy. There's a very well-known Christian voice today who has said, if you use pronouns, you are a heretic and you are bringing sin into the Christian camp. And that has a chilling effect on the entire conversation. And this is what rhetoricians call the definition of the situation, right? I define how the situation is to be talked about. Now, listen, this person may be right on substance, and it may be unwise or unbiblical to use pronouns, but to label a person that they disagree with as a heretic has a chilling effect on the entire conversation. And already people have gotten upset with me for defending that there would be times I would use preferred pronouns based on Acts 16. Paul, in deference to the Jews, chooses to circumcise Timothy on his second missionary journey. And that's in the book. We unpack that a little bit. Now, we just jumped to the most controversial part of the entire book. So let me just say this to listeners. This book isn't about pronoun usage. It's not even about politics. It's about when you have a family member, a coworker, a neighbor, that talking makes it worse. Like we try to talk about it, and honestly, it goes sideways because we don't have a game plan on how to have this meaningful conversation. That's literally why we wrote the book. Is for common people to break the stalemate, take one step towards a person they disagree with.
Well, Tim, I'm sorry I can't talk to you anymore because I'm actually with Sean on this issue. You know what? I was faced with this just this year with, a boy in a dress wanting to identify as a girl. And I mean, I don't mean to be cruel. He looked like an awkward young teenage boy in a dress. And it was almost, I had to not laugh because that would be mean. But I thought, here's what I think the tendency to do is, and that is to go, I was talking to him just a minute ago, and I noticed that he, whatever, and so I just used his name, which was not his name, was another name, but, people change their names all the time, so it's like, whatever, but there's this weird, like, do I go along with the lie? I mean, do I pretend here? Because I think it is pretending, but at the same time, that the overarching thought in my mind was be nice, be gentle. I mean, this is the first time I'd been around this boy and his family, and I wasn't looking to stir up any controversy. I was looking to establish a little bit of a relationship, what we could at the time, because the reality is if you don't have a relationship with somebody, they're not going to listen to you when you speak the truth. Right. But in order to build, and Jesus did this, he built relationship with people that he completely disagreed with, and I believe it was to open the door to transformation down the road. So I mean, we got to play the long game here a little bit. I mean, how do we strategize in a way that is not compromising, but that is not just off-putting?
So two quick thoughts. This is Acts 16. Paul's going into synagogues with Timothy. He has a Greek father. He's not circumcised. And Jews are saying circumcision is a prerequisite, right? To get God. Paul's going to disagree with that. He's going to talk about a spiritual circumcision of the heart. But what does he do? In deference to the Jews, he circumcises Timothy, which could be misinterpreted in a heartbeat, like, oh, you agree exactly the way we do. And Paul says, no, 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 no. I did this out of respect to you. I don't need to do this to get to God, but I need to do it to get to you. Then let me share one other story, Randy, that just stays in the back of my head when I think about pronoun usage. A faculty, I teach at Bible Institute of Los Angeles, Biola, and a faculty member came into my office. They have a foster child who is transitioning, okay, and dresses counter to their sex. Here is a phrase I've never forgotten, Randy. With tears in her eyes, she said this: no church wants him. No church wants him, they, them at their church, and she can no longer take her cross-dressing child to church. Right? And I'm like, okay, what do we do with a child, and this was a teenager as well, Randy, who is confused, trying to figure this out, going through gender dysphoria, and church, I can't even take him to the church because nobody will accept the fact that he's cross-dressing, right? And I just wonder, where did we go sideways on that? I don't see Jesus having a litmus test before he has table fellowship with notorious sinners in the gospel.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a fear of seeming to accept something that is not accepted in Christianity, right?
Right.
By having that, but yet at the same time, you go. I mean, I think of the church as a little bit of a spiritual hospital, and it's almost like saying, "Man, I'm not going to the hospital. There's sick people there." It's like, duh, right. And so we don't want to let people that are not on board with us into the church. Like, how are you ever going to get them on board? But it is difficult. So, okay, I mean, so you take James's admonition to keep yourself unspotted, as one translation, by the world, untainted by the world.
Yep.
How do we maintain that separation? Because even the idea of holiness, we're called to be holy, which is set apart, which is different. How do we maintain that while having people in dresses, men in dresses in our church? Or, I mean, is it, because I think that's what people are like, I don't want to be tainted by the world. I don't want to look like I'm going along with the world. But yet, you're at the table with sinners. That looks like you're tainted by the world.
Well, let me just make two quick comments.
Yeah.
One, Randy, I appreciate your...
You got balloons.
Balloons. That's so stupid. I'm so sorry. So being the co-director of the Winsome Conviction Project, we travel to churches. We've been doing this for 5 years. Very few, if any, would describe themselves as a spiritual hospital.
Okay.
Almost none I can think of would say we're a spiritual hospital. So of course sick people are going to come to us, and we have to accommodate them as they hear the truth and get potentially healed. I love the idea of the church being a spiritual hospital, but we set up a triage unit way before the front doors of that hospital,
Right.
where it's like, dude, you can't take the dress off.
Yeah. Right.
Take the dress off. So I do martial arts, Randy. I haven't shared this illustration in a while. I do martial arts, and I watch the UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. There's a man named the Black Beast. He gives himself that name. That when Houston had all the flooding, he jumped into a boat and rescued 99 people from the floodwaters.
Jeez.
The very last two was a man draped in a Southern flag with his shivering child right next to him. And the Black Beast is obviously African-American. He turns the corner and he says, "Hey, get into the boat." And the man with the flag says, "Listen, the flag's really important to me. I want to take it with me." Here's what the Black Beast said: "Bro, get in the boat. Your child is freezing, hyperthermia. We can talk about racism later, but right now, your daughter is literally in danger of losing her life. Get in the boat." Randy, I do not think churches do that. Churches say, the flag can't come in the boat. The dress can't come into the boat. And that's the triage I'm arguing against. And now listen, are good Christians really going to disagree on this? Yes, that's why we wrote the book and the Stalemate, because people in the pews are going to disagree how to vote in November. They're flat out going to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to something like critical race theory, good Christians are going to be on both sides of that issue. And if your listeners are saying there's only one side to critical race theory, then psychologists call that mind blindness, which means I cannot see the other perspective.
Yeah.
I literally can't see the positive points of the other side. And that is a skill I think we're most missing today, is set aside my beliefs long enough to see the world through your perspective. I'm not condoning it.
Right.
I'm just seeing what you see.
Okay. See, now you're on to something that I have learned. It's taken me a while, because the Lord knows in my 20s and earlier, not always good at this. But that is when I disagree with someone, and it starts to become evident, or it's clear from the get-go. Right. Maybe I know, look, they're going to come at me. They're going, I go into listening mode instead of talking mode, which is interesting, because when people feel like they're heard, they feel like they've established a relationship with you, which is kind of funny, because I literally have said hardly anything, but people feel like they know me because they talk the whole time. And you go, okay. But again, back to what is the goal? If the goal is to build relationships so that truth can prevail, that really requires listening. And I don't know that we're always good listeners.
So we have a whole chapter on the heart before we ever get to listening and perspective taking, because Jesus said it's from the heart that you speak. And let me just revise that a little bit, if I may. It's from the heart that you listen.
Okay.
It's not just from the heart that you speak. Am I willing to even listen to you? So we were talking before we hit record, and we created a website called endthestalemate.com, where you get to go, and we know you're going to encounter perspectives you're going to disagree with. So you got to check your heart first, and then we teach you how to listen to perspectives that we know are probably going to trip some emotional wires. It's totally free. We hired a really talented web designer to help us with it, and we do politics first, because we know the election is coming up. So you're going to listen to one really articulate Christian who says you can't read the Bible and vote for President Trump. The other is going to say, listen, I know he's rough around the edges, but when you look at his platform, that lines up with Jesus's kingdom. But they're really articulate, and you're going to watch both of them. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to maybe identify with one, and you're going to shake your head at the other.
Right.
It's when you shake your head, you most need our book and balloons. You most need our book and balloons. So that's what the website's for. And you don't need to have read the book ahead of time, Randy, to utilize the website.
Okay. All right. By the way, if you're listening on the podcast, you're not watching, he's got as an iPad or iPhone or something that is just occasionally throwing up these balloons, which I got to say, if you're in a contentious argument, you might take some balloons with you, because if you just release some balloons, it's going to diffuse a lot of the stuff. It just, I don't know, it kind of works. But
Randy, seriously,
yeah.
I teach rhetoric. Mm-hmm. There's a whole field, the rhetoric of humor.
Good.
How humor can lower people's defenses and cause commonality. But we've lost our sense of humor.
Oh,
Christians are deadly serious about everything, and so are non-Christians. We need more G.K. Chesterton today than we need C.S. Lewis, and I love Lewis, but we need more Chesterton who could dress as a donkey at dinner parties and make George Bernard Shaw, a humanist, laugh out loud. As they're about to go do a debate and disagree on almost everything.
All right, so Muehlhoff is obviously German, so I don't know, I can't comment on sort of the German sense of humor. I am actually primarily Irish in my descendancy. I mean, I'm an American, right? We have the more I get into like Irish literature and things like that, the more I go, I get that. I mean, so I'm glad you just validated my like number one way to deal with everything in life, which is through humor. Right. Sometimes a little dark, sometimes a little offbeat, but I do think there is something to it, and it does work. Laugh at
yourself, Randy. Laugh at yourself.
Yes, right.
It's like I'm gonna laugh, and now listen. If you're gonna laugh at yourself, that's a heart condition. So we have a whole chapter on how do you identify what's happening in your heart, and then most importantly, how do you deal with it? Like, what are some spiritual practices that you can do as you're angry at a person, you have contempt, disgust? Well, that's not the second great commandment, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. So we need to deal with the heart issue before we ever get to communication techniques that are found in the heart of the book.
And I always say, if you can't make fun of yourself, just make fun of someone else. So keep that in mind. See, there you go. There you go. There's an example of it right there. All right. So a couple of things real quick. So you guys are watching. This is the website, endthestalemate.com. Looks like this. So you can go there and be challenged, and you'll be half happy, half angry, depending on which side.
Yep.
But you know what? I do. It just living in this bubble and echo chamber that we do, especially in the political realm, but we also do it in religious circles too. I really think it's unhealthy. I mean, one of the most, I think, beneficial things in my life from a spiritual standpoint has been the fact that I grew up in a Southern Baptist church until they politely asked us to leave. Then was in a non-denominational, went to Oral Roberts University, which has a lot of charismatic, but you'd be surprised because it also has a lot of other influences there. Went to United Methodist Church before they did the global split, came back. And I've been, I mean, I gone to Catholic Mass before, right? You want to talk about disagreements? Let's talk about the Pope, right? But being able to hear the way other people think and see things has given me an appreciation for different views, has gotten me out of the I'm always rightness that I think is a little bit endemic in human nature. But if we don't, well, we just won't be effective as a church, I don't think, until we can sit down and listen and converse with people that we completely disagree with.
Yeah, but then when we converse with them, we better have a game plan of what that disagreement is going to look like.
Okay.
Like we share 4 different steps of how to organize a difficult conversation. Otherwise, it's going to go south. We have ample evidence of conversations going south. So my wife and I speak at marriage conferences, and sometimes couples say, well, we just try to talk it out. And I'm like, that's not always a good idea unless we have a game plan, right? Book of Proverbs, a word spoken in the right circumstances is what's praised, and listening is praised as well. So we do share a 4-step model of how do you set the ground rules of having what could be a potentially volatile conversation. And so that's kind of what we mean by end the stalemate. Have the conversation, but do the heart work first, and then have a game plan of how to organize it.
So here's a tough question. And this can be between me and someone who thinks that, contemporary worship is heretical in my church, right? Or it could be with someone who disagrees with me politically. It could be with someone who wants to use pronouns. So that was you. What do we do though? What do we do with someone? And you're not this. I'm joking, but what do we do with someone who absolutely doesn't want to hear what we have to say, just wants to condemn us, and they're not moving, and we're not going to move them, and they're kind of mean about it? What do you do with that conversation?
Well, I'd have to know contextually, are we talking inside the church, outside the church?
I think it can be both.
It can be both. Inside the church, the stakes are even higher because Paul has clearly said to the church at Ephesus, protect unity at all costs. So are there reasons to leave? Yes. I think they need to be rare, few and far between. In a different book, Winsome Conviction, How to Disagree Without Dividing the Church, I lay out some of those conditions by which you might leave. Mm-hmm. But I think by and large, Paul's going to say, right, at the Church of Rome, you got Jewish converts, you got Gentile converts. Jewish converts want to do days and diets. Mm-hmm. Gentiles are saying, no way are we taking that Jewish baggage. What does Paul say? I'm not going to settle this one. Do not have contempt for each other, and do not stop the work of God because of food. Randy, we're stopping the work of God over everything. Yeah. And I think with a fellow Christian, I really do try hard to live in harmony with them. I can confront them, I can edify, but at the end of the day, I'm going to grant you the freedom to disagree on what we call disputable matters. And I think days and diets, Paul would have said, was a disputable matter. But hey, crazy important back then. I mean, days and
Right.
diets
Right.
got Jesus in trouble all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to have to learn to live with each other. I think we need to tone down the rhetoric. Um, and I think we need to be open that I could be wrong on some of these middle issues, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is worship style. I think that's the use of pronouns. I think that's when Jesus is coming back, right? Eschatological disagreements. And so I guess being at a university, Randy, you just meet really, really, really smart people who disagree with you, and they know the Greek better than you could ever dream.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you just hold the tension.
Right.
You say, you know what? We
Right.
both love the Lord. I kind of think you're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not gonna die on this hill. We're dying on every hill today. That's
Yeah.
the church.
All right. So, if someone comes at you with anger, is that maybe a clue that now's not the time?
Yes, for sure. We call it timeout. I teach de-escalation training to corporations. Yeah, for sure. Taking a timeout is really wise. One, to de-escalate yourself.
Right.
When a person's coming at you with heat, I need to de-escalate.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's good to say, hey, now's not the time and place. I'm upset. You're upset. This is a really valid topic. I do want to talk about this. I think I need to prepare to have this conversation. You put it on yourself, not the other person. Like, dude, you need to prepare for this.
Yeah,
Got to control right now.
Right.
Right? So I think those kind of things, yeah, I'd take a time out. I would.
I think the fastest way to de-escalate is to tell the person, you just need to calm down. Right?
Where are the balloons?
Yeah,
the balloons?
right. We need
That
the
is
balloons.
not-
Yeah.
Studies have actually been done, Randy. I do a like a Letterman top 10 list, and what has been shown to escalate a person the most is number one, calm down.
You just need to calm down.
Calm down.
So, okay, last question, because I've gone over, and I appreciate you holding over, because I do think this is an important conversation. What's the payoff to going through the hard work of preparing, of being nice, of letting someone maybe treat you poorly in order to maybe try to establish some kind of relationship or repair a broken relationship? What is there a payoff at the end of this?
Yeah, I think there's two payoffs, one spiritual, one relational. Honestly, when Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, they are the children of God. I think when you do this, you feel the affirmation of the Holy Spirit. Even if the relationship isn't restored, I still think you get Jesus saying, hey, well done. That's exactly what I wanted you to do. Second, we have seen remarkable turnarounds in relationships because the Holy Spirit takes these communication techniques, listening, perspective taking, empathy, and drives it into another person's heart. So the great thing about being a Christian communicator, the Holy Spirit is working 24/7.
Yeah.
On that person's heart. I need to trust that that's happening and that God's going to use my graciousness, right? Bless when insulted. Jesus, turn the other cheek. When we do that, the Holy Spirit is using that to work in the heart of another person.
That is hugely encouraging, and I think we really need to keep that in mind, because again, sometimes we get caught up in the moment. We're very short-sighted, and it's not all on us. It's not on us to win a person or to win an argument, and winning an argument is so overrated. Trust me, I've done that many times, and it doesn't win the person. It doesn't win the heart necessarily, and so keeping the first things first. Please the Lord in your conversation, right?
Yeah.
If that would be at my forefront instead of win the argument or prove my case, I'm better off that way. All right. That's really good. And we could keep going, but I'm just going to push people to the website, inthestalemate.com, as well as the book, In the Stalemate, which is available now, fresh, hot off the press. You can pick it up wherever you get books. Anything you want to add before I let you go, Tim? I really appreciate your insight and the conversation.
Yeah, I would just say, if Jesus could turn the other cheek in one of the most horrific situations of being slapped by Roman centurions, certainly we can turn the other cheek for his sake. Remember, being reviled, he did not revile in return, Peter notes. And I think we can learn from that.
Yeah. And when Jesus promises that when you basically take abuse for him, that you'll be blessed, We all want to be blessed, just not that way, but keep it in mind.
That way, yeah.
Right? I know. All right. Great conversation. Again, inthestalemate.com. And the book is available now. I appreciate all you guys out there watching. Good conversation in the chat. Just keep being nice. And you guys all were. You're wonderful. Appreciate you guys. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed, please do that. Hit that share button. Get someone else in on the conversation. And the book is available wherever you get books. We'll see you next time here on Life Today Live.